Welcome to Madlit Musings, the podcast where you get to eavesdrop on your favorite authors without getting caught. I've been stoked to have authors like Angela Hunt, Bill Myers, Nicole Deese, Tessa Afshar, comedian Bob Smiley, and more on the show, and this year I have another great lineup of storytellers and truth-sayers. If you love to eavesdrop at coffee shops like I do, this is the podcast for you. It's where we get real, we get tough, we laugh, and we might even cry. It's where we meet authors on a different level, where every story and podcast episode has its own heartbeat. So hang out with me today. I'm Jaime Jo Wright, your host at Madlit Musings. This is your podcast for real chats with real authors about real life. Today's episode was brought to you by Baker Publishing Group, with Revell and Bethany House Publishing as divisions. We're super excited to be sponsored by Baker Publishing Group and to bring you their fabulous authors and their fabulous lineup for 2025. Be sure to check them out at bakerpublishinggroup.com and also check out their online bookstore at bakerbookhouse.com. Hi everyone, it is Jaime Jo Wright here at Madlit Musings. I'm excited to have with me today Sara Brunsvold. Welcome.
Thank you for having me back, Jaime. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you here. And you know, all this time I always say Brunsvold, but is it pronounced Brunsvold or is it Brunsvold?
No, you had it right. Yeah,
did I?
Brunsvold.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good.
Well done.
Hey, you know, every now and then I conquer something correctly. Oh, fun. Well, I'm glad to have you because you have a release coming out that we need to talk about.
Yes, an exciting release.
It is. It is very exciting. It's called, let me make sure I get it right. It's called The Atlas of Untold Stories.
You're
correct?
on a roll. Perfect.
Hey. Don't expect more from me in this podcast. You got to carry the rest, Sara. Oh, well, for those of you who are listening, Sara and I are good friends. We're actually kind of like, would you say we're half sisters? Like we're both published by the
pretty much, yeah.
Baker Publishing Group, but I'm with Bethany House and you're with Revell. So I think that makes us half book sisters.
Half sister, or we could say cousins, maybe.
Cousins.
You know,
that works too.
A little closer, yeah.
I'm not sure how that works in the publishing world, but either way, we have a lot of fun working together. And tell the readers just a little bit about, like, if they were going to run into you in a coffee shop and say, hey, how would you introduce yourself? How would you let them know who Sara Brunsvold really is?
Ooh, that's a deep question. Okay, well, if I was in a coffee shop and I ran into somebody who enjoyed reading, I would be like, I love reading too. I'm a reader first and foremost. I was an English major in college, and so I just love to read. Okay. And I write women's contemporary fiction for the Christian market, of course. And I love writing realistic stories that take you into the shoes of someone who probably looks or sounds like you or someone you know, and allows you to live their life for a little bit and maybe explore some trials or some really cool experiences that you realistically may either want to experience or have experienced. So I'm a big believer in sharing stories that speak life, speak hope, speak truth. So if you're the kind of reader who likes that as well, let's connect. Let's be friends.
Connect. Absolutely. Absolutely. So what do you think it is? Okay. I promise we'll talk about your specific book title here in a second, but why do you think some readers gravitate to books in your genre when we're already living lives that are, you know, we have our own trials, we have issues that we're going through. So what is it about reading a book about issues that people are going through?
Yeah.
Why do we read those?
Well, I can speak to why I choose to read them. I choose to read them because I kind of want... So C.S. Lewis has this famous quote that says, we read to know that we're not alone. And I think that's why I gravitate toward realistic fiction, whether that's contemporary or historical. I love seeing characters who are representative of experiences that I myself may be trying to navigate, or I just want to grow in my compassion for somebody who's going through an experience that's different than mine.
Mm-hmm.
And there's actually been some research about that fiction readers tend to be much higher in compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a good reason for that is because we are willing to view the world through somebody else's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that's why I choose it. I just I read to know that I'm not alone.
Oh, I like that. Sounds like a t-shirt.
It does, doesn't
Like
it?
a
Well,
t-shirt
C.S.
slogan.
Lewis, I
I
mean,
read to know that I'm not alone. I really like that. But it's true though, because there's different genres of fiction, but obviously within that Christian women's fiction or that contemporary women's fiction genre, you are exposed to topics that you might not experience on your own, and I found even when I've read those that it's like a safe way to explore it without feeling like you're going to hurt someone by asking them questions about that specific topic or
oh,
trigger
that's good.
someone.
Yeah,
So I'm always curious as to why people read that, because sometimes I pick up a book and I'm like, I want to escape. I don't want anything serious. And then other times I'm like, I want a book I can chew on and think
yeah.
about. Yeah.
In fact, I love that you bring that up because I just finished a book by Carlson,
Mm-hmm.
Melanie
Mm-hmm.
Carlson.
Yep.
I get the name wrong, but it's an older book called
Okay.
Finding Alice. I
Okay.
don't know if you've heard
I
of
have
that, but
not.
it's about a young woman who freshly diagnosed with schizophrenia
Mm.
and trying to figure out how that affects her place in Christian community.
Mm.
And that's not a subject that I have a lot of familiarity with. It's
Right.
not an experience that I have or someone close to me has had. So I really appreciate books that expand my perspective of
Mm-hmm.
these topics that maybe my brothers and sisters in Christ are going through
Yeah.
that I don't have knowledge of, or
Mm-hmm.
but I want to understand. Just like you said,
Yeah.
you kind of you want to understand what other people are going through, and fiction does feel like a safer space to maybe get in the shoes of somebody who is
Right.
either a loved one of somebody
Mm-hmm.
going through that. Um, but it's not always dark and heavy like that. Also,
Oh, I know. Yeah.
there's a lot of. I know our conversation just kind of went.
I know. We
Woo!
just we go deep, and all of a sudden everybody's like, "Wow, okay, you two."
We're really not depressive people, I
No, we
promise.
really aren't. We aren't. So let's talk about your book that's coming out. It's called The Atlas of Untold Stories, and I can attest there are very happy sunshine moments in this book and some
Yes.
really exciting things I'm looking forward to reading myself. So tell us a little bit about this story.
Yeah, glad to. So, in a nutshell, this book is about a mom and her two adult daughters who go on a bookish road trip around America's heartland.
Love it.
So, they spend 9 days exploring sites related to American literature, either the works or the authors or both. And along the way, they are discovering some untold stories between themselves, among
Mm.
themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And what they learn, particularly about each other, with the help of this literature, is bound to change their lives for the better. So this is a book about moms and daughters. It's a
Okay.
book for people who love books,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just it's very inspired by my own two daughters. So
Mm-hmm.
there's that element as well.
Love that. Now, did you for research do this trip with your two daughters?
I wanted to. I wanted to so bad. But I think you can appreciate you have teenagers as well.
Yes.
It's
Yeah. Mm.
really, really hard to just get a weekend away, let
Right.
alone, 9 days.
Mm-hmm.
So we did do some piecemeal explorations.
Okay.
So, the trip it starts in Kansas City and then it kind of goes in a clockwise circle around. So we did go to some of the sites as a family
Neat.
to do some
Okay.
exploring, which was really cool. My girls
Yeah.
got to actually be part of that book research.
Yeah.
So that's been a lot of fun. But yeah, I unfortunately didn't get to do it all at once, the way the characters do.
Right, right. Don't, you kind of wish you could, but yeah, like you said, it's not always realistic, especially with
Yeah,
teenagers and jobs and school and all
exactly.
that fun
Yeah.
stuff. So I do know there is a character in this book that I'm looking forward to meeting that is not your typical character, that has a name called Goldie.
Ah, yes.
So tell us a little bit about this unusual character.
So Goldie is the chariot, if you will, of the three Vance women. Goldie is Chloe, the youngest daughter's yellow Nissan Xterra
I love
with
it.
questionable reliability and virtually no air conditioning. And that is what they travel in as they go on this road trip. And so, yes, Goldie is a fun character. If you look very closely on the cover, you will see
Uh-huh.
Goldie
Uh-huh.
right in that design, and I just love it. I love it that Revell worked her
Yeah.
into the cover.
Yeah. That's just fun. I had to give Goldie a shout out because
Yeah, definitely.
she deserves a shout out. So, okay. So, first of all, you said this is for people who love books. And so did your English major background come into play when you wrote this book, and are we going to
Yeah.
see certain classics featured, or how does that work?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
So, one of the reasons why I wrote this book, in addition to just being inspired
Hmm.
by my daughters, is I am a proud Midwesterner who loves books.
Hmm.
And as an English major, yes, I was exposed to a lot of the great American literature, which many of which is featured in the book, and I'll get into that in examples in a second.
Yeah.
But I also am very aware, as a lifelong Midwesterner, how much literature history actually exists right
Yes.
here in the Midwest.
Yeah.
How many bookish related sites there are, and I was just fascinated by that. And so the more I looked into how many there were, how many were driving distance from where we live in Kansas, near Kansas City,
Hmm.
I was just amazed at just the richness of this history.
Okay.
So, for instance, just half an hour down the road from us is where Langston Hughes grew up in
Really?
Lawrence, Kansas. And the first poem he ever wrote was actually inspired by, it's said to have been inspired by the Kansas River that flows through
Oh,
Lawrence.
how cool is that?
Yeah. And then, of course, Willa Cather in
Hmm.
Nebraska. That's where O Pioneers was said,
Okay.
and My Antonia. Um, Little known fact, the Iowa City, Iowa is actually a UNESCO City of Literature. It has so much connection to great American literature. It has
Really?
that designation. So the Iowa Writers Workshop takes
Okay.
place there at the
Yeah.
university
Hmm.
campus, and so many great American authors. Uh, Now, Flannery O'Connor being
Okay.
one of them,
Okay.
have ties to Iowa and or Iowa City specifically.
Okay.
So that's an example. Mark Twain, of course, is from
Hmm.
Hannibal, which is
Hmm.
kind of where I grew up in the
Okay.
Hannibal area. St. Louis has a number of great authors associated with it. Um, Kate Chopin, T.S. Eliot, Maya Angelou was born there,
Hmm.
and then we go down to Laura Ingalls Wilder. Her final
Right.
homestead was in
Right.
Missouri.
Yep.
Um, and then Tulsa, Oklahoma is where The Outsiders, S.E. Hinton's Outsiders,
Really?
takes place. And that's actually where they filmed the movie as well. And
Okay.
so like the house
Interesting.
that is used in the movie is still there, and it's
Really?
turned into a museum. So yeah, you can go and visit the Outsiders house.
And people thought we just had cornfields and cows and
We're
prairies.
flyover country.
I
Yeah,
know.
no,
Yeah.
we've got a lot to offer.
Right. Right. Of course, now there's going to be like this mass population coming in to see all these places because of your book, Sarah.
Yeah,
The
maybe.
states will be like,
Yeah,
why did our tourism just skyrocket in 2025?
you
Well,
got Sarah to thank.
it's Sara Brunsvold, folks. Sara Brunsvold.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, that's fun. Okay, so if I'm getting this straight, you have a mother and two daughters traveling in a car named Goldie that is unpredictable, and they're sort of following along, meeting up with the pasts of these different fiction novelists or areas that are special. And then this untold story part, where does that come in?
It's really so this is a family dynamic story at the
Okay.
heart. And
Okay.
so it's that mother-daughter dynamic. And the stories that maybe you don't know about each
Mm.
other.
Mm-hmm.
And this encouragement, literature, fiction has a way of unlocking or giving us language in which to express
Yeah.
things that we haven't had a way of saying before or
Yeah.
sharing before. And so that's what you see happening over the course of the story. These women, as they are encountering these fictional lives, they see a way then to share about their real lives, their hidden
Mm-hmm.
lives, their untold lives.
Okay.
And so that's where that part of the title comes in.
Yeah, I like that. It's interesting when you think about the dynamic between the mother and daughter specifically. Um, I remember growing up and, there's mom and she's just mom, right?
Mhm.
Mom doesn't really have a past or a history. Mom's just the one who makes supper and
Right.
makes sure I do my chores. And then I remember hitting that point in my teenage years where mom started kind of opening up and showing me more adult issues, more things, and nothing was necessarily horrible, but just exposing some of her vulnerable times as she grew up and experiences and life decisions. And all of a sudden, you're like, wait, mom's a person?
Yeah.
She has a
Right.
story?
That's right. Mom is a human being with
Yeah.
many layers to her. And
Yes.
yeah, that's such a universal, I feel like that's a pretty universal experience. What you're
Hmm.
describing is that, you grow up and your parents suddenly become something that you never saw them as
Right.
before. And
Right.
like your whole perspective of them changes.
Hmm.
And hopefully it actually deepens an appreciation for maybe some of the things that they have experienced or some of
Right.
the things that they have uh, accomplished
Hmm.
or maybe survived in certain situations.
Yeah.
But it definitely gives you a more nuanced view of them as a person.
Right.
And maybe those character traits or those personality traits that on the surface are grating, or maybe the things that you feel like you have to get away from,
Hmm.
but when you understand what's actually driving that and
Right.
how they got to where they are, suddenly things begin to change and your
Yeah.
perspective changes.
Yeah, and they start to
Yeah.
make a little bit more sense. And there's kind of vice versa too. Obviously you have
Mhm.
teenage daughters. I have a teenage daughter. And I replay some of my own personal experiences from those years, but then I also look at her and the thought goes through, which I never thought I'd have as a mother, but like, what are you not telling me? Not that I don't
Mm.
trust her. I trust her. It's like she has her own mind, her own dreams, her own heart, which I
Mhm.
had at that time. And I hid, not in a negative way. I just kept that stuff inside of me because those were my private thoughts. And it's so strange
Yeah.
having a daughter at that age now where she's not 3 and she's not blabbing everything out in the world to know about. She's got her own hidden stories.
Absolutely. And sometimes it is an unintentional hiding as
Hmm.
well. So I mean you kind of see that in one of the daughters,
Okay.
Lauren, the older daughter. You kind of see her discovering things about herself that she didn't
Mm.
even know. So she's kind
Mm.
of learning her own untold stories and how then those intersect with
Hmm.
her mom and her little sister. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's that.
Now, how old are the daughters in this story?
Okay, so Lauren is early 30s, very
Okay.
young 30s, and
Hmm.
then Chloe is she's about 26.
Okay. Okay.
So they're full on adults,
Yeah.
but still young enough that and they're single.
Hmm.
They're still trying to find their way in the world,
Hmm.
but they're still young enough that they are. Um, haven't quite arrived with who they are and
Yeah.
where they're supposed to be. I
Yeah.
don't know if we ever get to that
I
point,
was going
but
to ask you that. Do we get to that point, Sarah?
I don't know. Maybe when I'm 50. Who
Right.
knows?
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. That's staring down at me a little too closely, but
Same. Yeah.
oh, funny. So, really, in a sense, though, this is kind of like three women who have always been together because they're family and they're still almost forming their identities. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
discovering
and
that.
yeah, I think you definitely see that with each one of the characters. So
Hmm.
they're discovering each other, but they each have something about themselves an
Okay.
epiphany
Hmm.
about themselves, and both their past, their present, and their future. So
Mm-hmm.
it's, yeah, you're discovering right along with them.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. So, question for you, and you can refrain from answering if you don't want to. Have you ever been on like a road trip or a vacation or something where you've experienced kind of either an epiphany moment or or a faith moment or something that's just really stuck out to you?
That's a good question. I don't know if I don't know how deep of the epiphany
Mm-hmm.
I have ever experienced on a road
Yeah.
trip, but I think there are moments where, particularly if I've gone somewhere that's beautiful,
Yes.
naturally just beautiful and peaceful, and I think that immersion back into creation
Yep.
is always soul refreshing and soul shaping in new ways every time.
Yeah.
So that is what comes to mind. I wish I had some sort of like, oh my goodness, I was on a beach this one time and this turtle came up and it was just, yeah.
And it started talking to me. Well, that's a different kind of epiphanies there. No,
Like,
it is interesting though. I remember one specifically. I was overseas with my sister-in-law. We were backpacking through Europe, and we were in Rome, and we went to St. Peter's Cathedral.
mm,
And like Midwestern small town, very German town, grown up. I mean, everything's like the small church. It's the small Methodist, Lutheran, Baptist. I mean, that's just kind of where I'm at. And then to walk into this huge cathedral was in and of itself overwhelming. But what was really interesting, and I did not expect at all, was they had I can't remember what they call them, but they're separate in a Baptist church. We'd say there's different auditoriums, right? But they're not auditoriums, right? They're like vestibules or something. And each
mhm.
one was an area where people could go and pray for Mass during Mass and different periods of time in the Catholic Church. But they had them open. And my sister in law and I were like, you know what? Let's just take some alone time in this church and go wherever we feel like we want to go, etc. And the more I walked into some of these places, I was just like, it was really an epiphany how architecture and art and beauty and the majesty of a building could point your mind toward the majesty of who God was. And there was such I don't want to say holiness as in the church itself was holy, but just
Mhm.
that feeling of being in the presence of God that was so holy. And I remember sitting down on one of their things. They had like these kneeling pads and kneeling down and just spending time in prayer in that ancient church and just feeling the testimonies of everyone that had gone before and everyone that was still going to come and the history and the fact that God had been through all of it,
Wow.
and I would say when you're thinking road trips, traveling, those types of things, looking for those moments when God can be like, hey, I want to teach you something. It was a
Yes.
really poignant moment for me. I was like, wow. Um,
Yeah.
so
That's
anyway,
beautiful. Yeah,
yeah.
and so I've been to some of those chapels in like England,
Okay.
and then
Hmm.
one in Ukraine. Actually, I
Oh,
I did a short term mission to Ukraine many years ago,
okay.
and they have beautiful cathedrals as well,
Hmm.
some of the oldest in
Hmm.
on the continent. But yeah, I get what you're saying. I can
Yeah.
totally picture, being in those, and they're just so massive, and you
Right.
feel about this big,
Yes.
and just
Yes.
the grandeur of it all. Yeah, it
Right.
is
Right.
breathtaking.
Yeah.
And to think that, if man can create that, if human beings can
Right.
create this, I mean, just think about what that's just a small sampling of the
Yes.
grandeur of God and the majesty of
Right.
God.
Well, and I kind of look at, and bringing it back to your book, you look at relationships in a sense being God's architecture too,
Mm.
and how he builds us in a family unit and the relationships that we have with each other and whether they're going to fit together or rip apart, collapse, And so it's neat to see that kind of woven through the Atlas of Untold Stories and this concept of road tripping together with mom, road tripping with my sister, and
Mhm.
uncovering things that I didn't really expect to uncover.
Mhm.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And that is that's one of the themes, one of the motivations for
Okay.
Chloe, the youngest, is the one who kind of coerces maybe her mom and sister to go on this trip
Okay.
is because she is wanting to unlock a sense of adventure and a sense of appreciation for things outside of your comfort zone
Okay.
that will challenge you in good ways.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so there is that sense of let's go do this together. Let's go
Yeah.
find these untold stories together.
That's so cool. That's so cool. If your readers were going to take one thing from this book that you really hope that they take away, what would that be?
Oh man. I guess I would have to stick with the family
Okay.
dynamic angle
Mm-hmm.
in this. And my hope is that they would have a greater appreciation for the women in their family, whether
Mm-hmm.
they are the mom with daughters or maybe it's their own mom
Mm-hmm.
that they want to have a I hope that it lights a fire that they want to be more curious
Mm.
about the perspective of these other women in
Okay.
their families and how, like you were saying so beautifully, how God has woven these family units together for a reason, and
Mm-hmm.
just exploring that, how do we all fit together? And um because we do, we were meant
Yeah.
to be in this family unit together,
Right.
so I hope it unlocks that curiosity
Okay.
about the women in your
That's great.
family.
That's great. Well, the book is called The Atlas of Untold Stories, and it's releasing here in June. You can get it wherever books are sold. If readers want to follow you and stay up on the books, and I know you've got more books coming out, and you've had books in the past, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, come visit me at sarahbrunsvold.com.
Mm-hmm.
That's in my monthly newsletter, gives you the closest view and the most insight into everything that I'm working on,
Mm-hmm.
deals and offers that I have going on. So come find me there, or Instagram or Facebook is
Okay.
also among my stomping grounds.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Sarah, this has been super fun having you, and I'm looking forward to reading the travels within Goldie the car, and and finding out what some of these untold stories are, because I couldn't ask you what they were because then that would spoil the story.
Spoiler alert, that's all right. Well, thank you
Uh,
so much for having me, Jamie. This has been fun as always.
and that's a wrap for today here at Madlet Musings. I hope you join us again. And if you want to, be sure you like and subscribe here at your favorite podcast player or on YouTube, because you won't want to miss all the wonderful alerts that let you know when we have another conversation for you to eavesdrop on.